joining rapidly. We're giving everyone a few minutes here because the participant numbers are going up. You should be able to see that in the bottom of your screen. 88, 93, 101. You're all coming in now.
No way. That's incredible.
That's great. Keep going up. 132, 141. So as you all come in, I'm just going to talk a bit of nonsense while everyone takes their seat. So you're very welcome. This is the second panel of the Locked Up Festival 2. We're going to call this festival Locked Up 2 Electric Boogaloo. But we couldn't really figure out what to do with that or how that would work. It was just a stupid idea. But anyway, I quite like it. So you're very welcome. Thank you for purchasing your tickets and coming along. You will see in the chat, my colleague Luca Veste will have posted a link to Waterstones. And if you click on that link, you'll see a list of all the participants' books. All of these authors and movie stars and actors are all giving their time free today. So if you can go along and buy some of their books, you will see books for our panelists, books for every attendee or every panelist in the festival. And it's 30% off if you use the code LOCKEDUP2. Don't put Electric Boogaloo in there. You'll get no money off at all. So hello, everyone. This is the Legal Issues panel. I'm Steve Cavanagh, and joining me, you'll see live from a prison cell in Wormwood Scrubs, Imran Mahmood, who has muted his mic. If you could unmute your mic, Imran.
I am now unmuted.
Oh, he's unmuted now. We have Nadine Matheson.
I'm back. Hi.
And we have Tony Kent.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Tony Kent, Killer Intent. That's his first big. I love the way that Tony's first big rhyme with his name. I have some kind of a twitch. Something happens to me if I don't say Tony Kent, Killer Intent. But anyway,
I'm going to change my name for the next one.
That's it. So we're going to have a chat. It's all going to be quite relaxed. The title of the panel is Legal Issues because our panelists here, now we're all lawyers or ex-lawyers. I'm an ex-lawyer. And our books don't necessarily all cover or talk about the law. Some of them do, some of them don't. So we're going to have a general chat. Keep things quite informal. If you have any questions for us you want us to answer, put that in the Q&A. You'll see a little box Q&A. I'm just going to click on the chat there. There's everyone saying hello. There's Miss Smyrns. Hello, Miss Smyrns. So let's kick this off. So I'm going to ask Imran, first of all. Imran, you're still a practicing barrister. How's things been over this COVID thing? Have you been doing Zoom calls disguised as a cat? What's been happening?
Well, in fact, it's funny you should say that. Some of the cases that because I do crime and civil, and so the civil courts have been doing some Zoom trials. So I've done an inquest by Zoom, which was a week or something. I did a kind of a PI case, which involved a crash and a bash by Zoom. And the weird thing about doing a trial by Zoom is that you're cross-examining over the link. And you'll sometimes see a witness who's just not just in their bedroom with the kind of Ferrari posters behind them, but in one case, I had one guy who was in his bed, and the judge turned to him and said, "Where are you, Mr. Smith?" And he says, "I'm in my bedroom." He says, "Well, are you in your bed?" And he says, "Yes, I'm in my I'm in my bed." He says, well, I don't think you've made the effort. I don't think you're taking this seriously. I'm going to kill the link. And he killed the link. Yeah, and so we were adjourned for another 6 months for that one. But the criminal stuff has to be when it's a jury, it has to be in person. So when I've done those, turned up to the Crown Court, and the juries are in the kind of they're in the jury box, but they have a kind of perspex screen dividing them. And everybody's kind of sanitizing, and you're standing kind of 2 meters away from everybody else. So yeah, it's been kind of business as usual, but with a bit of technology thrown in. It's been all right. I haven't minded doing the Zoom trials where the top half is dressed and the bottom half is pajamas.
Right, great. What about you, Tony? Have you had a pair of trousers on the last year or what?
I haven't even got a pair of trousers on now, to be honest. Yeah, I've completely embraced this whole top half of the body thing. I have hanging over in the corner of the room just one half of a suit, and it is the top half of the suit. But no, I've actually been in court a lot, physically in court a lot. I've had, I think, 7 trials since we reconvened again in September, and it's been pretty intense. But yeah, Imran's absolutely right. Everyone sits in these boxes now. In the jury box, you can only fit 8 into it, so the other 4 get slung off to the public gallery. But they're all it's like the Mr. and Mrs. show when they stick them in the isolation booth. So you've got to wonder whether or not anyone's even listening when we're talking to them. I mean, they normally pretend to listen, but with the isolation booths, God knows.
My goodness. So Nadine, you've been doing some teaching as well as writing, is that right?
I have, because I'm freelance, so I'd stopped practicing just before we went into lockdown, and then obviously we went into lockdown, so I was completely out. But I teach in the law school, so, and I also present courses to trainee solicitors. So I've still been doing that, but obviously it's all been all online, and the students have just been crazy. Like, it's not like no one has a camera, but all of a sudden no one cameras works. I had one student, he turned up in his Darth Vader helmet. So there's been,
Really?
yeah. So there's, I'm supposed to be teaching criminal law. He told me, and he seriously told me he's having a bad hair day. And I said, I can't teach to Darth Vader. I just can't, not for 2 hours. So eventually he took it off. So I've had those moments.
That's ridiculous.
Completely.
I hope you give him a bad mark then.
No, my students did well. I had to give him credit for like creativity. A little extra.
You're too good. Well, listen, I wanted to ask you your various careers in the law. I know some of you do criminal, a bit of a mix of civil as well. How has that fed into the writing, do you think? Would you be the same kind of writer without the legal background? We'll start with Nadine.
I'd try mute. No, I don't think I'd be the same. But I think for me, because I've only done criminal defence, the difference thing, because I'm now writing police procedural, so I've had to switch my brain around to thinking like a prosecutor. Because before, as a defence solicitor, I'm always looking for the holes in the prosecution's case, whereas now I need to make sure there are no holes when I'm doing the case for police procedural. But obviously I've got all the background knowledge, which obviously, law helps, criminal law helps. But with certain aspects of the police procedural side, luckily I've got friends who are police officers, so I've contacted them just for those little moments that you might miss. For example, like if a police officer, parks outside someone's house, it's like, well, do you put a note on your dashboard if you're if you're a plainclothes officer? Like, what do you do? So little moments like that, just to make sure it's authentic. I don't have police officers emailing me telling me that I've got it wrong. Luckily, it hasn't happened yet.
Good. It will happen. Somebody will complain and say, well, we don't do that.
Someone complained, not about the police procedure. They said my book didn't leave them warm and happy. I'm like, it's called The Jigsaw Man. It says it takes a killer to catch a killer. It's like a knife on the front. It's not meant to leave you warm and happy at all. And if it does,
give me that warm feeling.
If it gives you a warm feeling, if it gives you a warm feeling, something's wrong. Exactly. Maybe.
What about you, Tony?
I think, I certainly couldn't have written my second book without being a lawyer, and it would be harder to write about Michael Devlin because he is a lawyer. But I don't think my books are very legal, and they're not like yours. They're not legal thrillers. We sort of veer into it occasionally. The second book was a legal thriller, and the fifth one, which I haven't started yet, will also be a legal thriller, but set in the International Criminal Court. But I think, I think that if I hadn't been a lawyer, I wouldn't have learned to write. I think my writing was probably pretty terrible. I don't know how good it is now. It's not the best, but I'm sure it was pretty terrible before I learned to write, and before I was a lawyer. But you do so much drafting as a lawyer. You go through, this yourself. You go through so many documents. You have to turn them in so quickly. I mean, as you guys know, when we were warming up for this, I was finishing a sentencing note for tomorrow that I had to upload before 4. So you learn to do these things pretty quickly. So I think the ability to write probably comes from being a lawyer. the ability to write and hit a deadline and turn things around. But I don't think it hugely impacts what I write. If anything, I think it might actually make me move away from that. I think I don't write very dark stuff, although people who've read the second one disagree, but I don't think I write very dark stuff. And the reason that I don't write very dark stuff, I think, is because I see it every day. And writing for me is a bit of escapism from that. So in a roundabout way, yeah, I think maybe it dictates the slight more lightness of the kind of stuff, the more light entertainment versions of what I do.
Imran?
Yeah, I think I agree with both Nadine and Tony, because my first book, You Don't Know Me, was the whole thing was a jury speech, and it was a speech that a young defendant accused of murder did for, as if he was doing it himself, and I don't think I would have been able to do it if I wasn't a lawyer. And this second book, which isn't out yet, but in June, I Know What I Saw, has some bits in it which are. So there's one bit which involves an interview with the police, and there's another bit which involves them kind of being in court. And I don't think I would be able to do that. I have to say, when I started, I didn't realize, it's kind of embarrassing, I didn't realize that I was writing a crime book. I thought I was just writing a book. And then it was just, because when I go into bookshop, or when I used to go into bookshops to buy books, I would just pick up something which I liked the look of. And it usually didn't fall into kind of genre, clear genre. I'd pick up something which was Booker, or something which wasn't, or something which was kind of easy read or a holiday read. So I didn't really realize that I was writing crime fiction in that way. So if I wasn't a lawyer, I'd probably write something I knew a bit more about. And I think I probably only write the crime stuff because I know more about it than anything else, I think.
That's interesting. Well, I have a follow-up for that, but before I wanted to come on to this. So did you read a lot of crime then before you wrote your first crime novel?
None.
No.
None at all. I didn't start reading crime fiction until I'd written my book.
Right.
And then somebody said, because they started off, the publisher started off saying, well, we don't know what to do with it. Do we put this into crime fiction, or do we put it somewhere else? And eventually they said, we'll put it into crime fiction. And they were having this conversation kind of behind my back. And then when they kind of brought me into it, I said, I don't really know what the issue, what the problem is. Does it have to be in a kind of defined category? And they said, oh, yeah, it does.
It does.
And they said, we think that you should go and read some crime fiction. So I said, well, who's good to read? And they said, Steve Cavanagh, try him. He's really good.
They did not say that.
They did.
Did they?
And in fact, more than that, my niece, who's a huge Steve Cavanagh fan, said, you've got to read Steve Cavanagh. Because that will show you how to write crime books. So then I read a Steve Cavanagh, and they were all wrong. Terrible. But yeah, no, it's what's interesting is there's such an array of crime fiction. So you can have this kind of true crime stuff, or what I now know as a police procedural, which I didn't know then, or courtroom drama, or just something where murder happens. I know when I spoke to Erin Kelly, she said she started off writing literary fiction, and then somebody said to her, if you stick a murderer and a murderer in it, you probably sell a few more copies. And so she did that, and then found that, yeah, she'd really hit the mark.
Yeah, I mean, crime fiction is more popular than literary fiction, sells more copies, really.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking for the next book, I'm going to just call it Electric Boogaloo, and
that's the way to go.
Imran Mahmood, Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it already. So I wanted to, our genre, in terms of crime and legal thrillers, we'll broaden it out into legal thrillers and crime, but I take it you all being lawyers, you all read legal thrillers. Imrad's read, or at least read one of my books. So, I mean, who are your favorite writers in that genre, in the legal thriller genre? Either one of you. Well, let's keep this free flowing.
Okay, I've got this on mute, you see, and I'm trying not to unmute it too early before anyone else is going to speak. Well, I've read all of your books, Steve, which are all excellent, and whatever Imran says.
Apart from me, you're not allowed to talk about me.
He says this when he's not talking to you as well. He's very, very disparaging about the whole thing. I think Connolly's obviously pretty much out there on his own right now. John Grisham back in the day was fantastic. I, as you know, am a big fan of David Baldacci. He's not a huge legal writer, but he is a former lawyer, so he'd sort of fit onto this panel if he was allowed on. And those would probably be the guys. Imran's first book was just absolutely incredible. I mean, that blew me away, and I can understand why they had trouble placing it in terms of a genre, because it was completely unique. And I remember saying to Imran at the time, how are you going to follow this? I mean, just how do you follow that book? It was such an unusual book. I've now read the new one, and he followed it really, really well, is the answer. But yeah, I think really the usual suspects in terms of legal thrillers for me.
I was going to say, Tony's taken all of mine authors, because I'm going to say exactly the same. All the John Grishams, all the David Baldaccis, Michael Connolly. But I think I went through a phase of reading loads and loads of like legal thrillers. Then I started working in law, and because I was working in law, I didn't want to read it anymore. So I kind of went the other way, and not necessarily focusing on the legal thrillers, but maybe more the police procedurals. But now I'm starting up again. But for me, I never really wanted to write about a lawyer, because I didn't want other lawyers calling me up.
Is that why you didn't? Because I would have thought you've got a niche there, Nadine. You didn't want to do a legal thriller.
No, I didn't. But that was at the time. Now, I've done the first book, done the second book. Well, in the middle of editing the second book. But now I've got an idea for like a standalone, which I might do a legal thriller, because I do like that whole, that 90s Pelican Brief and The Firm, that sort of thing. I do like that. So I might bring it back in some shape or form.
Brilliant.
What I quite like reading, kind of in the kind of crime kind of family, is cozy crime and some historical stuff. So I've been reading Wasim Khan's Inspector Chopra series, which is very nice, and it has this kind of lovely kind of cozy feel to, even though there are people being murdered, and again, it's something I'd never come across before, the kind of concept of cozy crime. So it was a nice thing to kind of go away and read. And Abir, of course, writing his historical crime fiction. So yeah, I think it's all great. I love it all. And I read The Chain recently, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant books. And Vaz's books are great and very, very popular. The baby Ganesh, because Inspector Chopra, his sort of partner, is like a baby elephant. The series starts with him inheriting a baby elephant, and they're brilliant books. And Abir is fabulously talented guy. Although don't tell him I said that.
I will not tell him.
No one's allowed to tell him that.
Don't tell him that.
Straight to his head.
Shouldn't hear anything.
Really, I hope he's not on.
Don't encourage him.
Speaking of what Nadine was saying there about not wanting to write a legal book, I went through the same thing, and I went through the same thing not least because barristers are bastards. I mean, Imran can attest to this, and they would look for the smallest problem, any kind of thing that you get wrong. So when I wrote Marked for Death, which is the legal thriller, I was so careful there's things you have to change, but everything I changed was only ever condensed. It was never completely changed. For example, I wrote a 20-page chapter on a cross-examination for a cell site witness, and I avoided the use of the word azimuth, because that would mean something to us and to someone like Neil Lancaster, the author who used to be an undercover cop. But to most people, that would not mean that. So I've avoided words like that. But otherwise, you've got to be accurate, because they are complete bastards. And it would just be a nightmare to get something significantly wrong.
I found that out to my cost when I spoke to Tony's friend, Nigel Liffman, QC, who's also a judge. And he said, well, I've read your book, Imran. It's all fine, except for I did wonder about the speech. And I said, well, the whole thing's a speech. What did you wonder about? He said, well, it's 10 days long. 10 days long. I said, yeah, that's just not artistic license.
Well, of course, you have to have that. And I can understand what your sentiments there, all of you in this, because when I started writing, the last thing I wanted to do after, having a full day as practicing lawyer in Northern Ireland was to come home and write about a Northern Ireland lawyer. But I sort of solved that by moving my whole thing to New York. Then it's total escapism. Plus, I try and avoid as many legal procedures as I can, because someone might try and pull you up on it, if I've never been through that procedure before, or someone, it's not interesting, it's a bit boring, really. Nobody really wants to know that. There's no drama in that. So there was a name that didn't crop up there when we were talking about this, and it's not really legal thriller. It is crime, and that's John Mortimer. Is any Rumpole of the Bailey fans?
Absolutely. It's honestly the best thing potentially ever written. I was spoken to by a TV producer recently who said, apparently the rights are available. And he said, yeah, what do you think about updating it, remaking it? I think it would be really time for a reboot. And this is a guy who is fantastic. And yeah, it's the only idea he's ever had that I disagree with. And I just said, no, it's sacrosanct. That is just, it's the best thing ever written.
Agree. Have you, Nadine, you Rumpole fan?
Rumpole, my dad, when I was younger, he made me sit down in front of Rumpole of the Bailey. I think was it on ITV? I can't remember, but one of those stations. And then when I got a little bit older, I would read it, and then I sometimes show scenes to my students when I'm teaching, especially when I'm teaching advocacy. So I do love Rumpole. I would like to see him back, but I don't want anyone tampering it, if that makes sense.
The thing is, it'd be very hard to do that because Leo McKern, the actor who played Rumpole, so completely embodied that character and changed the character. Like his sort of caricature appears in the front of all the books now. And he's sort of become, and in some ways, John Mortimer adapted the character's speech slightly to be more in line with Leo McKern. Something with Colin Dexter did with Morse as well. That TV series changed the series of books as well. But Imran, John Mortimer
did the same thing with Sharp.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. And I was going to say that I spoke to a TV producer about the idea of doing something like that. And there were a couple of problems. One of the problems, I think, is that the wig is a kind of strange kind of hurdle or divider or shield between the viewer and the actors. It's very difficult to get this rapport going. But because he was so good in that, because Leo was just so brilliant and had such character, he could get away with it. He could get away with putting the wig on and still being who he was and being instantly recognizable and being lovable. And you had this magnetism, but be very, and they said they've tried it since and they find it very difficult to find somebody as charismatic with the wig on as off. And so it kind of, your relationship with that character is very, very stretched for that reason. That's why I think we've never been able to do these big legal dramas here in the same way as they have in the States, with LA Law and Ally McBeal and The Good Wife and all of these great kind of series. And they said it's because of the wig. The wig gets in the way. And I think it's a testament to Leo and how great he was, I think.
You mentioned Nigel Lithman earlier, Imran, the QC we both know. We've judged now that we both know. Nigel and I defended together in just a string of murders for about 10 years, and he is as close as you'll ever see to real life Rumpole. I mean, it was like watching him sometimes. I'd forget that it was Nigel and I'd be in Rumpole mode just watching him.
Well, speaking of Rumpole mode, I see in the chat there someone says Benedict Cumberbatch does the Rumpole audible, and he does a good job at that actually. But he couldn't play Rumpole.
No.
Maybe a young Rumpole. One of the last John Mortimer books was The Penge Bungalow Murders, which is referenced throughout the entire canon, and only at the very end of the series did he write, well, here's what happened, and it's a young Rumpole doing his first death penalty case. But that's good. You can maybe do that one. But I was going to ask you then, just about, is there any of your experiences you've had in the law that stick out for you that you think, I can't really use this, but here's a brilliantly funny thing that happened or a terrifying thing. Hit me with your stories, folks.
Can I tell you about my first day?
Yes, please.
Right. So this is my first day on my feet. So what happened was, so when you do pupillage, you do first 6 months, you'll know this, first 6 months just following someone and watching them do their cases. And then the next 6 months, you're still in training, but you get to do actual cases. You're unleashed. And my pupil master was a kind of a high court of appeal kind of guy, and he did commercial law. And he'd go along to the motions court, and it was all very civilized, and everything was very great. And so that's all I'd ever really seen. Anyway, so there was a tradition in, I didn't know this, in our clerk's room of first day on your feet. They don't do it anymore, but the first day on your feet, they try and kind of play a trick on the kind of whitewigs. And they'd sent me along to court, to the magistrate's court, Horseshoe Road. And they said, you've got two cases. One is Mr. Smith, and the other one is you're representing a kind of crime family, one of the people from this crime family. And we all knew about the Adamses and the Richardsons. And I said, well, what's this family called? He said, they're called the Anchors. You've got to look after young William, and he'll be waiting for you. So anyway, so I've got to get to court. And I've got this, all I've got is a back sheet. So I haven't got any papers, just with the name on it. And I'm walking up and down, so I thought I'll find him first. I'll leave Smith till later. And so I'm walking up and down the court going, so Mr. Anchor here, Mr. Anchor, I'm looking for a Mr. W. Wanker, Mr. W. Anchor. And always I had no idea why, until a guy from Chambers kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, yeah, I think they've been having you on. I went, oh, God. Anyway. So Mr. Smith, who was patiently waiting, they call that patient. In fact, he wasn't called Smith. He was called, I think Abdul Khan was his name. And he'd been patiently waiting. And so they call the case on. And so I go into the court. As soon as they walk in, they say, as they do in the motions court, that they would just say the name of your kind of client. So they walked in and said, are you Mr. Khan? And I said, yes. And they said, over here, please. And they lead me to the back of the court and kind of lead me to where the dock is. And I'm saying, no. I'm not the client. And they said, no, just shut up and sit down. Your case right now. We're calling it on. And so, because I was terrified, so I just sat there. And they said, Mr. Khan, who's here for Mr. Khan? And I was waiting. I am. They went, just shut up. Sit down. We're looking for your representative. And eventually Mr. Khan himself was waving and said, I'm Mr. Khan. And they come to the front. And it was about 10 minutes before they realized that we had been in different positions. And when I finally got to the front, the magistrate was you called them a stipe back there, but it was a stipe. And he said, well, what were you doing the time? I said, I was trying to tell them. Anyway, so I couldn't use that, and that was my worst day. First day.
That's brilliant. I love that.
You got me all nostalgic for Horseshoe Road.
Oh, you can't be nostalgic for Horseshoe Road. It's a terrible place.
It was awful. But I can tell you my favourite case, and this wasn't even like one of the big, massive ones. When I was like quite new, but it was two traffic wardens having a fight outside the Toys R Us on the Old Kent Road. The whole basis for it was just like a really bad episode of EastEnders, because apparently one traffic warden having an affair with the other one's wife, and then there was an allegation of cheating I didn't know there was like traffic warden exams, but apparently there were like traffic warden exams. So there were allegations of cheating. So they had this big dust up outside the Toys R Us on the Old Kent Road. And I got found not guilty, which was good, but it was just for that moment. It was just too funny. You see the judge just trying to hold it in. You're trying to be all serious and professional. It was too much.
Brilliant.
It can sometimes be extremely difficult to stay professional. I was my very first trial as a pupil. So I think about the third or fourth day that I was following my pupil master around, he was co-defending with 3 other members of Chambers. And I mean, I'd gone there with no experience at all of court, really, apart from having watched it once when my brother was on trial years before, which made me want to be a barrister. And other than that, I'd not really been. I'd followed a couple of people around magistrates' court. So this is my first experience of the Crown Court. I've got a wig on, gown on. I'm sitting at the back behind my pupil master and 3 other members of Chambers. So I'm on my absolute best behaviour, trying to think, right, we're going to, I've got to be diligent. I've got to do what anyone needs me to do. I've got to, best behaviour. 4 members of Chambers here, including my pupil master. And then they proceeded over the course of this 3 weeks to just piss about in such a way that I would never have anticipated anyone. There was one of them got up in the middle of someone's cross-examination, disappeared for 10 minutes and walked back in carrying a Starbucks, where he just decided that I'm bored with this now. So he just wandered down to Starbucks. The other one of them at the end of the row bent down to plug in his laptop. And the same Starbucks guy, who I actually, over the course of years, discovered has a very rich wife and just doesn't give a shit. The same Starbucks guy, when the other chap was under the table in his wig gown, jury there, plugging in his laptop, decided to lean on him for what has got to be about 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, it went so far beyond the joke, it stopped being funny. And then it became really funny again because he just wasn't letting him up. And the jury, there's evidence being heard, and the jury are just looking at what the hell is going on. And they're looking at us for some sort of guidance of how do you deal with this? But we didn't know either. And this is the same guy, actually, who, when I made my very, very first jury speech, I did what we all do. I wrote it out word for word. I was scripted. I was prepared. I left it in my notebook in court over lunch. And the court had a quick hearing after lunch before my speech. And guess who was in the hearing? I go back in, he'd found my notebook, he'd removed the speech, and he'd replaced it with a very intricately drawn picture of a cat's arse and the cat looking over its own shoulder seductively. And I had to then stand up and make that speech in that case, just from memory, which, as if I recall, did not go well.
Actually, Tony, you've just talking about pranks. You've just reminded me of probably my favourite story ever, and it was. Do you remember the Brinks-Mac gold bullion robbery trial? You know, it went on forever, and there were kind of loads of kind of sections of it. My kind of old head of chambers was in that case, and he was telling me a story where they'd all had to go off to do commission rogatoires, which is like taking statements abroad. So they'd stopped the trial midway. They all went abroad and they all came back and they carried on the trial. And back then you could get them to bring exhibits to court more often than you do now. Usually you just have photographs. But back then they would bring the actual exhibits. And this guy says to the officer in the case, cross-examining him, he says, have you got any of the gold? Have you got any of the gold here? And he's going, yes, you previously asked us to bring the gold, so we've brought a bar of gold. And they brought out this bar of gold. He says, very good. Now, can you pass it to the jury and so they can all see it? So this gold bar. And it goes around the jury and they all look at it. And they pass it on. He says, and now perhaps counsel could have a look at it. And so they passed it around counsel. They all have a look at it. And they give it to him. And he drops it. So he drops the gold. He says, you're right, very sorry. I've dropped the gold, and picks it up and hands it back to the copper who's in the box. So the copper takes it, looks at it, and looks at him, and looks at the judge. And the judge says, Mr. Stevens, will you please give him back his gold? And what he done was, you remember in the airport, you used to be able to get that chocolate gold bar. He bought one of those. Switcheroo. Chocolate bar. I'm very sorry. It was a mistake.
Wow.
We used to be able
brilliant.
to do that kind of thing back then.
Yeah,
it used to be
it's still a wee bit
job.
like that in Northern Ireland. We have, but it depends. I think judges can be very difficult, or brilliant. There is a real people think if you're a judge, there's a certain level of competency, and they don't really realize that some people are a judge because they had lunch with somebody, 2 or 3 times a week. I have no business being a judge at all, but some judges are brilliant. There was
I explained that to people. I explained that to people.
I'll tell a very brief story here, sure. And then I'll go back to this. But there was a case of this is sort of a typical Irish case. There was a guy who brought a case. Basically, what happened was he was gored by a bull, right? He was this guy was at a pub with his mate, drinking away, and a farmer came in and said, the farmer was in his 80s. Farmer says, my bull has escaped and got in this other field. Would you move that bull into the top field? And here's 20 quid or something. The guy said, dead on, no problem. So he went out full. to go and get a hold of this bull and get into the top field, and the bull gored him. And he sued the farmer and said, you never told me this bull was, apparently this bull had a reputation in the area as being particularly difficult, and he didn't know this. Really. So he brought a case and he won in the county court. And then it was being appealed to the High Court. The farmer was basically, their defense was that the guy was full. He was just so drunk that if the bull gored him, it's his own fault because he was drunk and antagonizing the bull or whatever. So what happened was he was being cross-examined, and the barrister's got his medical notes and records in front of him and says, you drink quite a lot, Mr. Smith, don't you? And Mr. Smith says, well, the odd time I would have a drink, yes. And I said, well, I've got your medical records here, and you went to your GP and you told your GP that on a day you would drink 20 cans of lager. Is that right? And the guy thought about it and he said, no, that's not right. He says, are you sure about that? He says, I'm absolutely sure. He says, well, I have it in black and white, and it passed all around the court, and everyone's looking at it and getting the page, and there it is there. You told your GP on this date, and he's recorded 10 cans of lager a day, or 20 cans of lager a day. Do you dispute that? And he says, yes, I dispute that. I said, well, how do you dispute it? He says, well, I told him I drink 20 cans of lager a day and 2 bottles of vodka. The judge at this stage just roared and just, this wee man's telling the truth. And as soon as that happened, you just know, oh, you're finished then. This wee man's getting money. So I love stuff like that. Now, let's see if there's any good questions. There's people watching us here. Sorry, Tony, go ahead.
One of my favourite parts of that story, Steve, is the fact that you practice law in a place where there can be a bull that's got a bad reputation locally.
Oh God, yeah. But there's lots of people who have bad reputations where I'm from. You might see there's lots of. We've returned to our pastime of burning buses recently here, which is quite nice. Yeah. So here's some questions from people here. Where do we see? It's a question from Ayo Anatade. Hello, Ayo. Nice to see you. I have a problem with legal dramas because, as some of you know, where I work, so I can't really watch them as I pick holes in them. Do you have this problem?
Yes. I couldn't watch Silk. I mean, I watched it. Oh, it was just everything. From the gown, the wrong book, planning to be in the Crown Court when you're in Westminster Magistrates Court, even like, and then the little things that normal people just wouldn't pick up and have a fuss about. I was like, no, that's wrong. I can't, no. So yeah, I do the same thing, pick holes in it. I try not to, but
I can tolerate it if you can understand why they're wrong. I can tolerate it if the differences make the story work. I can't tolerate it when it's just wrong because they haven't bothered. That's when I get really pissed off.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I mean, there are some bits you can't make real because a murder trial will be 6 weeks, and you haven't got 6 weeks to watch all the stuff happening. Right? So I get that.
And a closing speech will be about an hour and a half.
About 10.
Yeah.
My book. Yeah, and I totally get that. In fact, I've been having the TV people in You Don't Know Me calling me quite regularly, saying, I'm the set designer. Is this what a courtroom looks like, or is this kind of roughly right? And I having seen that, gone through that process, I understand why they get it wrong, because some of the differences are quite subtle. Like they'll have the kind of dock about 8 feet high. You know, that never happens. It's all on the same level. And I would say to them, you can't have the dock kind of way up in the gods. Why have you got that? And they would either say, well, that's what we did last time, and we're just copying something that we've seen. Or they'd say, look, it's to do with getting the cameras in. We can't get the shot of that and the jewelry in the same sweep if they're on the same level because people will be in the way. So I'm getting a slightly better idea about why they're getting some things wrong. But that whole thing of, magistrates court and everybody turning up with a wig and gown, that's crazy. But
there was another, I don't know if it was the series about the lottery, but Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the coffin scandal. And I'm sure someone shouted out objection in the courtroom scene. And I'm like, we don't do that. I tell my students, because they always ask me, well, do you see objections? Like, no, we're very British about it, and we stand up and we So,
20 minutes later.
I'll be honest. I know the person who defended that case, and there's a good chance he did.
he did shout objection. But it's moments like that. I'm like, UK courts, we don't have a gavel. The judge doesn't bang on the gavel. We don't shout objection. I would like to shout objection one day, but no.
I had a litigant person who kept saying objection, objection whenever I was saying anything. And the judge was saying, that's not how we do it in this country. You have to say what your objection is. And he says, don't say it again. And he said it again. And by then I just stood up and said, move to strike. Overruled.
See, I get to write all this brilliant stuff because we don't have that at all.
No.
What happens is instead of saying objection, somebody will and then get to the climb to their feet and say,
yeah,
that's no good. Do it like that.
Yeah.
So we're pretty British. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
Do you ever struggle though? Do you ever struggle to not say the stuff you see on TV? I once, when talking, I didn't stand up to object, but I was talking to the judge about how I objected to something, and I mentioned to reiterate that I strenuously objected, which is obviously directly from a few good men.
Ooh.
And the barrister next to me, this must be 18 years ago, still hasn't let me forget that. Just on the basis that, that's just not how you do this in our country. But sometimes it's hard not to.
Did you say, I want the truth? I want the truth. And did he say, you can't handle
it? The judge couldn't handle the truth, so I stayed away from that.
Yeah.
One day.
I really like that movie. I really like A Few Good Men, but the courtroom scene is not. See, that's the weird thing. There's fantastic drama. We've all, I'm sure, seen amazing nail-biting drama in a courtroom, but you don't get the same type of thing on the TV. They just can't recreate it, or can't get it. I think maybe it needs a wee bit of time sometimes, for a cross-examination to really pop. And it's a story in itself. There's twists and everything in it, and reveals, and it's exciting, and it's a battle of wits and battle of words. You don't get that. You get somebody said, "Oh, you're a liar," and shouting and roaring to people. Growlers, we used to call them. We had different types of barristers, and we'd say, "Oh yeah, you need a good growler for that case." And that's just somebody that shouts up and goes, "Rah, rah, rah, you're a liar."
But always come like.
Again, we can't put this in the book. We had a guy, a barrister. I don't know if he's still practicing. He had this brilliant thing. He would cross-examine people over his shoulder. So the witness is there, and he's like this, and he would say, "And you did this, and not right, not right." It was just so bizarre. So
I know. Sorry, Carol.
Go ahead. No, go on.
I knew a QC who did exactly that same thing, and he would face the jury while cross-examining. And there was one occasion where he was examining in chief, his own witness, his own defendant. And this bloke, this guy was, he'd allegedly attacked somebody with a knife and did a horrible offense. And he was completely mad. But this QC, because back in the day, the QCs didn't go and see their clients. The junior did all that, the junior barrister. So this QC hadn't really met his client. And throughout the course of the trial, what he saw of him was convincing him this man wasn't mad after all, just completely off the head. And the junior was saying, no, you got to spend some time with him. He's crazy. And by the time he got into the witness box, he said, right, we're putting him in. He's going to be fine. And the junior's begging him not to. And so he then proceeds to examine him and does exactly what you just said, Steve. Looks at the jury and doesn't look in the direction of the bot. And he's getting all the questions, all the answers he wants. And then he asks as the roundup question, and tell me, did you stab her? Did you stab Miss X? And he didn't get an answer. And so without looking, he asked the question again. And then he notices that all of the jury are looking at the box with perplexed looks on their face. So he slowly turns around and he notices the box seems empty. The guy's no longer standing in the box. And then the guy's head pops around the side of the box and he gives the answer. And I wasn't there for this, but apparently it's completely true. Gives the answer, yeah, I stabbed her, and I'll do it again if I ever get out of this effing free. He'd gone completely insane. And again, the guy hadn't seen it coming because he wasn't even looking. He's looking at the jury the whole time.
That's not good.
No,
That's
no.
not good.
I tell you what's not good is when you're doing a trial and you know it's rubbish, you know you're going to lose, but you think you get to a point and you think maybe I might have swung the jury around, like you convince yourself, and you hear the jury go out into their room. And I was in London in the annex, but so the jury rooms are very close to the courtroom. You can hear them laughing. Every time
That's not a good sign.
No, it was so. This trial it was a fraud trial, and it was a fake identity trial. It was supposed to go on for 3 days, went on for 10. And as soon as my client gave evidence, I was like, no, this is not going well. I knew it was going to go well, but the fact you can hear them laughing clear as day every time we had a break. And then, yeah, surprise, surprise, you got found guilty.
Yeah.
It's incredible how long you can do this job for and still do what you just said, which is convince yourself by the time you have to make a speech. I don't think I've ever made a speech where I wasn't convinced I was going to win, even though I knew the evidence and I knew how ridiculous it was. But you just have to get yourself into that place, don't you, to make that speech.
I had one guy who was up for 10 counts of something I can't remember, but he was being cross-examined by this really good, great prosecutor, a mate of mine. And he says to him, so he's given his evidence, so he's effectively, I'm not guilty. And so the prosecutor says, so I know this judge. He's a very nice judge. Even if you plead guilty right now, he'll give you a discount on your sentence. So come on, tell me, did you do it? And he says, I swear on my kids' lives, counts 1, 2, 5, and 7, and 9 I did not do on my kids' life. And he says, well, what about the other ones? No, I didn't do those either. But
clients are funny. I had this one client who's up for a burglary, swearing blind it wasn't him. It wasn't him on the CCTV. I'm like, who is it? It's my twin brother. It's my twin brother. And he's sitting next to his mum. His mum's like, you haven't got a twin brother. What's wrong with you?
Actually, I had a friend. I have 3 friends who are lawyers, and we were out one Saturday night in Belfast, and our thirst was slaked, shall we say, and we came home. And the next morning, my friend phoned me and said, "I have to go to the police station." I said, "Why?" He was on call that weekend, so one of his clients been arrested. Let's go to the police station. Do you know there was a fight we were in the bar in last night? I said, I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. He says, well, it must have been after we left. So he went hungover, head roaring off him, terrible hangover, to go and represent someone who had been in a bar fight. And didn't they have CCTV? And there's my mate, the solicitor, with his client beside him on the video, with the client beating somebody up. And we're just talking away. We've ignored the whole thing behind us. So that was not good. But well, let's have a look, see if there's any more questions here from people, because people are asking good questions here. Yes, is there anything, let me see, what about your works being adapted for TV? I know Imran and Tony, and have you can you give us an update? Nadine, have you been optioned for TV yet?
I have. I've been optioned by Monumental Television.
Brilliant.
So we're in that, yeah. So you got optioned before the book came out.
Wow.
Similar to last year at lockdown, it got optioned back in July. Actually, no, 2 years before that. So back in July 2019, it got optioned. So we're still in that early development stage. So yeah, hopefully, I want to see the Jigsaw Man on TV. That'll be cool.
Oh, Tony.
It's still all going on. They've extended their options with Liberty Films, who made Source Code and Moon and Mute and Warcraft, and Duncan Jones is looking to direct it. Whether it's going to be a TV show or whether it's going to be a film, it's all up in the air. I mean, things are slow, and they're slow anyway, and they're definitely slow when the whole world stops for a year. So so it's moving, it's ticking on, but no dates yet.
Okay. Imran?
Yeah, I've been very lucky because mine, you don't know me, was the screenplay was written by Tom Edge, and because it's Tom Edge and he's a very well-known screenwriter and has a relationship with the BBC.
I have no idea who Tom Edge is.
Oh, so
I'm glad you said that, because I thought it was quite ironic with the title.
He's not that well known. Never heard of him.
Right, well,
we don't know him.
he wrote The Crown.
With the Crown. Oh well, there you are.
Him. Oh, well.
J.K. Rowling's crime series.
Yeah.
Where she's not called J.K. Rowling, but something else.
Yes, Robert Galbraith.
Galbraith. He wrote all of those as well. The Cuckoo's Calling and all that.
Oh right, okay.
And so the BBC quite liked him. So they once they knew that he was writing the screenplay, they greenlit it quite early, and they're shooting it at the moment. So
Brilliant.
it's kind of 5th week of being shot. So fingers crossed it'll be up soon. But I don't know whether that.
Not sure you need to cross your fingers if they're 5 weeks into shooting it.
If their first day of
That's
shooting,
real superstition.
got your money.
You just can't tell with these TV people. It seems to take forever. But that was back in 2017. They optioned it, so we're 4 years down the line, and it's just kind of the gears are still turning on it, and they've had to extend it and extend it and extend it and extend the option, and then every bit of it takes more time. Even costume or set, or they do about 50 or 60 versions of the screenplay. Which I didn't know. I thought you'd have 1 or 2 edits like a book, but it goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. It's kind of endless process. So hopefully this autumn.
Well, that's great. That's great news. Lovely to hear that. Let's see if we have any more questions now, folks. Oh yes, what about your upcoming books? Tell us what's next. Anybody jump in?
My next one, next one's coming out is the end of the year. It's coming out in hardback. It doesn't have a title yet, so it's just book 4. It's a kind of a post-COVID book. It's about domestic terrorism in America and kind of the resurgence of the Patriot movement and all those kinds of guys, where they're getting rather pissed off that they've been locked down. So I write in almost a parallel universe. We have the same world, the same history, same everything, but different prime ministers and different presidents. And my US president dealt with the COVID thing properly, but in order to deal with it properly, he shut the country down. And so we're now I've got my main character, Joe Dempsey, who's the intelligence agent. He's dealing with basically a terrorist attack that comes about because of that, trying to get to the bottom of this. And there's if you've read Killer Intent, we're revisiting some of the characters who have disappeared since then. So I'm quite excited about it, except I've got to get it finished within the next 2 weeks.
Is it going to rhyme with Tony Kent, the title?
I'm going to change, as I said, I can't think of anything good to rhyme with Tony Kent, so I'm just going to change the name Tony Kent. I'll just make the name rhyme with whatever we're going to call it.
Excellent. Nadine, what's next?
I'm working on book 2 in the Inspector Henley series, so I'm in editing mode right now. So it's out. I think it should be out July 2022, and then the paperback of the Jigsaw Man will come out January 2022. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And
can you tell us any more about what Henley's up to this time?
Henley is investigating. It starts off when they're called to a church. We're back in Deptford in southeast London. So they're called to a church. There's a dead pastor in the middle of the church. And then when they're searching the church, they find another body in a concealed room. And it turns out that someone might have been trying to perform an exorcism. So that's how it starts. Yeah.
I like the sound of that. That's great.
I want to read that.
You will read it next summer. Make sure you get your coffee early, Tony. Don't worry.
Brilliant. Oh, hang on. We've got in the comments. We've got your next title. So Tony Kent Lockdown Lament.
You could well be that.
Come on, give me more Tony Kent titles now. Imran, what about you? What's your new one?
It's called I Know What I Saw, and it's out in June, and it's told from the perspective of a homeless guy who takes shelter in a house in Mayfair, and while he's taking shelter, he thinks it's empty. While he's there, he witnesses a murder, and then kind of ends up telling the police about it. They don't really believe him, and then when they turn up to the house, it's completely different from the way he's described it, and there's no dead body, and there's no signs of a dead body. There's nothing. So that's that.
And it's excellent. I've read it. It's a brilliant book.
What kind of you, Tony? I think your name's going to be on the front cover. Tony Kent.
It's yours.
It's called What I Saw.
I Know What I Saw.
I Know What I Saw.
What I Saw.
That's excellent. That all sounds fantastic, folks. We've only a few minutes left. I'm going to see if there's anything else. Any quick questions here? Does any of you know who the secret barrister is for bonus points?
I was asked to review the book by the Times, and there was a part of me which wanted to say I can't review it because it's me.
Yes.
But you know,
I wish I knew.
It's a really.
I wish it was me.
Yeah, really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how they are doing it, but even when they're doing panels, they do them by typing in their attendance and stuff like that. So it's
I don't understand why they're so secretive. What's to be secret about?
I think that the Bar Council are really funny about what you do on social media. I've skirted the line a few times and been slapped down for it. And so if you were to put out some of the stuff that the secret barrister puts out, despite the fact it's completely real, despite the fact it's completely accurate, there are examples of this currently going through the Bar Council. There are situations where barristers have inappropriately touched pupils and they get a slap on the wrist. If you tweet the wrong thing, they'll ban you. I mean, it's completely and utterly arse about face. It really is.
It's the same thing to solicitors with the SRA. Like, and I teach professional conduct as well and client care. And you look at some of the decisions, they're so arbitrary, they make absolutely no sense. There's no rhyme or reason to them. While you would give someone a slap on the wrist for inappropriately touching someone, but then you get struck off and fined because you sent out the wrong tweet.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah, the secret barrister has such important stuff to say that I think I don't blame them for wanting to keep their anonymity because, as you say, there are people who say, "Oh, this is bringing the profession to disrepute," or you're particularly if you're saying something about a judge or about a case, even if you're not naming the people in the case, if you're talking about a case or you're talking about the way instructions are being relayed, then you could say that they are bringing, there's an argument there, and I'd much rather see him protected or see them protected and remain anonymous, because I think that what they are saying is so important.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Come on, it is you.
There is so much of the law being a closed shop. The more open it is, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I was asked recently about whether or not we should be televising trials, and I really don't agree with that. But I do believe we should be televising judgments. I think when a sentence is passed, it should be televised, because the amount of times we see that badly presented in a newspaper and there's uproar about it. Whereas if they just recorded it and put it onto a dedicated channel, a court channel, not trials, not anything involving barristers, because we'd all just show off and get carried away. But sentences,
more than you do.
More, I don't think it's possible, Nadine, I've got to be honest. But sentences, I think, should be recorded.
But the Supreme Court does it.
They do.
Yeah.
As AO is telling us right now.
But I think more Judge Judy. I think Judge Judy should do all legal work. But
not wrong.
Thank you all very much.
And
I see Mr. Veste has posted the link for people to go and buy books. So that's like one of those big hook things that come and pull me away. So thank you all very much for watching. There's a panel. We're all going to go and have our dinner now. And there's a panel at 6:30, but for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what it is. I'm sure you'll know when you'll be back for 6:30, whatever. Oh, I do know. It's the world's worst book events. So tune in for that. That'll be good. And thank you, Imran. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you.
Go and get their books. And thanks very much for watching, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have 6. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.